I want to introduce you to Andres. You see his photo right there. He is a hairdresser. He is a gay man from Venezuela seeking asylum in the United States. He came to the United States lawfully. He was here working when he was kidnapped by the Trump regime and sent to a concentration camp in El Salvador. He is now lost in the El Salvador concentration camp system. And an article that just came out from a Time photojournalist named Philip Holsinger shows perhaps the brutal treatment of this individual, if the individual being described by Holsinger is Andres. And we know about Andres because his lawyer went on Rachel Maddow and talked about how Andres missed his immigration court appearance. He was here as a lawful asylum seeker. And when you put what was said on Maddow together with what's in this Time magazine article, a really dark and grim picture is being painted. Let me share with you from this Time magazine article. Let me show you what went down on the Maddow show. And then I want to talk about Trump kidnapping people and making them disappear and sending them to El Salvador concentration camps. So this is from the Time magazine article that just dropped. What the Venezuelans deported to El Salvador experienced. It went on and talked about how these detainees arrived. The photojournalist Philip Holsinger, who's been there kind of just covering the transformation of El Salvador, he talks about how the detainees, he says, it was their faces that grabbed me because within a few hours, those faces would completely transform. The Venezuelans emerging from their plane were not in prison clothes, but in designer jeans and branded tracksuits. Their faces were the faces of guys who in no way expected what they first saw. An ocean of soldiers in El Salvador and police, an entire army assembled to apprehend them. The transfer from the plane to the buses that would carry them to prison was rapid, yet it might as well have been the crossing of an ancient continent. I felt the detainees' fear as they marched through a gauntlet of black-clad guards, gun raised like the spears of some terrible tribe. I walked the line of buses waiting to depart, photographing their faces. A guard noticed one of the detainees turned toward the window and wrenched his head back down into his chest. The intake began with slaps. One young man sobbed when a guard pushed him to the floor. He said, "I'm not a gang member. I'm gay. I'm a barber." I believed him. But maybe it's only because he didn't look like what I had expected. He wasn't a tattooed monster. The men were pulled from the buses so fast the guards couldn't keep pace. Chained at their ankles and wrists, they stumbled and fell, some guards falling to the ground with them. With each fall came a kick, a slap, and a shove of these individuals. The guards grabbed necks and pushed bodies into the sides of the buses as they forced the detainees forward. There was no blood, but the violence had rhythm, like a theater of fear. Inside the intake room, a sea of trustees descended on the men with electric shavers, stripping heads of hair with haste. The guy who claimed to be a barber began to whimper, folding his hand in prayer as his hair fell. He was slapped. The man asked for his mother, then buried his face in his chained hands and cried as he was slapped again. After being shaved, the detainees were stripped naked. More of them began to whimper. The hard faces I saw on the plane evaporated. It was like looking at men who passed through a time machine. In 2 hours, they aged 10 years. Their nice clothes were not gathered or cataloged, but simply thrust into black garbage bags to be thrown out with their hair. They entered their cold cells, 80 men per cell with steel planks for bunks, no mats, no sheets, no pillow, no television, no books, no talking, no phone calls, no visitors. For these Venezuelans, it was not just a prison they had arrived at. It was exile to another world, a place so cold and far from home, they may as well have been sent into space, nameless and forgotten. Holding my camera, it was as if I watched them become ghosts. Watch them become ghosts. Here, somebody asks a question of Aaron Reichlin Milnick, who's someone who focuses on immigration policy. And this person goes, serious question. Is it really legal to deport someone to a labor prison in a third country? And then Aaron Reichland Melnick goes, this is a very important question because nothing in U.S. immigration law permits this. It's also not legal under U.S. criminal law, nor under the Alien Enemies Act. The closest comparison is the extraordinary rendition of terror suspects in CIA black sites under Bush. And even then, there was a case called Hamdan versus Rumfeld, which talked about a process that needed to be put in place for actual terrorists after 9/11. So I want to share with you right now from the Rachel Maddow show, and this is how I'm trying to connect these puzzle pieces, and I believe that Andres is the barber who is being referred to in the article because his lawyer was on the Rachel Maddow show. She's from the Immigration Defense Law Center. They do great work at the Immigrant Defenders Law Center. And here's how she described what went down. Play the clip.
And we feel it's important to let the world know who Andrei, our client, is, because he is a human being. He is a young professional from Venezuela. He's a makeup artist. He is a gay man. He is someone who came to the United States seeking protection. He came seeking asylum. Upon entry into the United States, he was detained because of his tattoos, some of which you can see in those photos, but these are not the tattoos of somebody who is involved with gangs. These are normal tattoos that you would see on anybody at a coffee shop anywhere in the United States or Venezuela. And today, we have confirmation from the government, one of the few groups or attorneys that have confirmation that our client is indeed in El Salvador. Our client last week was supposed to appear in court where we would have started the process of refuting the baseless allegations against him, but we never got to have that chance. Our client has been forcibly removed and disappeared, and we don't know what his legal case, where it goes from here.
And here she is again describing what went down. Let's play this clip as well.
So the only reason we know that our client is in El Salvador is because he was supposed to be in court last Thursday. ICE never presented him. Over the ensuing days, we realized that he was likely part of this, group of planes that went to El Salvador. When we went to court on Monday, we were finally told by ICE that it was confirmed he was in El Salvador. In that moment, they said that he was removed to El Salvador. The immigration judge said, how's it possible that he's been removed if there's no removal order? And the ICE attorney that was in the courtroom said, I don't know. The case has been set over, so we do have a hearing coming up in a couple weeks, but ICE has now told us that they will not facilitate communication with our client because he has, in their words, been removed, and that they will not make him available for that hearing in 2 weeks. So at this point, we are, of course, watching the case closely that is ongoing related to the Alien Enemies Act, and we're pursuing all avenues because, our client's life is at risk. We're concerned for his safety, and the fact that he was forcibly taken from the United States with no due process, it's something that really shocks the conscience in a way that we haven't seen since family separation happened in 2018.
Now, I want to share with you what Donald Trump's propagandist, Caroline Leavitt, press secretary, what she had to say when Donald Trump purportedly signed, although he now claims he never signed it, and then they claim he actually did sign it, but he said he didn't sign the 1798 version. He didn't take a time capsule and go back to 1798. The whole thing is ridiculous. Here, Caroline Leavitt says that he signed the Alien Enemies Act, invoking war powers, which had only been invoked in the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. And she said that he took these terrorists, she said, and took them off the street and then sent them to El Salvador. Here's what she had to say. Let's play this clip.
President Trump signed a proclamation invoking the Alien Enemies Act regarding the invasion of the United States by the foreign terrorist organization Tren de Aragua. At the president's direction, the Department of Homeland Security carried out a counter-terrorism operation deporting nearly 200 violent Tren de Aragua terrorists, which will save countless American lives.
Now, as Veronica Escobar explains, I understand wanting to secure borders. We all do. But the cruelty and lawlessness exhibited by this administration, sending immigrants whose only crime was entering this country without documents to a violent prison in a country not their own, is beyond comprehension. And again, I want to reiterate, Andres, for example, was here lawfully, a lawful asylum seeker who self-reported to go through the asylum process. As you heard from his lawyer, he missed the appearance because the Trump regime kidnapped him and sent him to El Salvador, where he was tortured and put in a concentration camp. Now, we also know from the Friday court appearance in the case filed by the ACLU against the Trump regime that they're aware of clients and they're aware of people, for example, women who were brought to El Salvador. And El Salvador only has men in their concentration camp systems, so they sent the women back to Venezuela, back to the Maduro regime where they were fleeing from. So who knows what happened to them as they were sent back to the Maduro regime. But even El Salvador didn't take the women who the Trump regime wanted in the concentration camp. We're also hearing stories like this one right here, a declaration of a lawyer named Lynette Tobin. And this lawyer talks about how her client, Jersey Reyes Barrios, was a professional soccer player from Venezuela, football club, came to the United States, working in the United States, soccer coach in the United States, had a Real Madrid tattoo, lawful asylum seeker. He missed his appearance, kidnapped, sent to El Salvador because of the Real Madrid tattoo. And also the Trump regime has a photo of him where he makes the peace or love sign. And they said that was a gang sign. And we're hearing about this from what's also went down in that court appearance on Friday. Judge Boasberg says in the hearing, the federal judge goes, the question is, can the government summarily deport people, I say kidnap, without an individualized assessment of whether they fall under the Alien Enemies Act proclamation? What happens if someone is not a member of a gang or a Venezuelan citizen? How do they challenge their removal? What is the process set up for that? Because now we're hearing these horrific, horrific stories. One of the things I also want to mention was the breaking news yesterday, a powerful scoop here from Jeff Stein, a good scoop from Jeff Stein at the Washington Post, and he explains how the Internal Revenue Service is nearing an agreement to allow DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, to use tax data to get info on undocumented migrants. Quote, a complete betrayal of 30 years of the government telling immigrants to file their taxes, one IRS official says. As Thomas Kennedy explains, most undocumented people pay taxes, trusting the IRS will abide by privacy laws. All this will do is now scare people into not paying taxes, which means less revenue. It's also ironic how this proves that undocumented people do indeed pay taxes. Can you imagine this? I guess you can with the Trump regime. They're going after the hardworking taxpayers. It's always been about the cruelty. And one of the things to that extent that they're doing as well is that they've announced that they're going to be revoking the legal status now of more than 500,000 more migrants, saying self-deport or we're going to do to you what you saw happen in El Salvador. The move will affect immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. And these are family members also of a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump. The Venezuelan community in Florida came out strong for Donald Trump. Now their family members are going to end up in concentration camps in El Salvador after fleeing Maduro. The same thing, fleeing the Castro regime in Cuba and now getting deported to concentration camps in El Salvador. I want to talk about this quickly as well. As Reuters reports, thousands of agents are now being diverted from handling other types of crime, federal agents, to deal with migrants. So we know that migrants actually don't commit more crimes than other people. So now the Trump regime is not focused on actual terrorism and actual crimes, and they're focused on stuff like what we're talking about in this video. Reuters confirms that Trump's obsession with mass deportation is making American communities less safe, with thousands of federal agents diverted from fighting crime to carrying out immigration enforcement, even agents whose job is to stop pedophiles. Well, that doesn't surprise me when it comes to the Trump regime at all. But it's not just law enforcement agents who are being taken away from their normal jobs for the mass deportation blitz. Federal prosecutors have been ordered to focus on prosecuting immigration offenses, which means more serious crimes like drug crimes are going unprosecuted. Folks, I know this was a bit of a comprehensive video. I focused on a lot of things right there, but I think it's important that you see what's actually happening in this Trump regime and pull all of this together. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 5 million subscribers, and let's keep calling this out.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.